They said she was just a stray, unwanted, unregistered, unloved, left to die behind a county auction barn in the middle of a snowstorm. But when I looked into her eyes, deep, amber, trembling, I didn't see a dog. I saw a memory, one that wasn't mine, but somehow belonged to me. What if the animal you rescue is actually here to rescue you? What if that creature remembers a past you've forgotten, a battlefield, a promise, a goodbye left unfinished in another lifetime? This isn't a story about saving a pet. It's about remembering a soul, and the battle that began when the world tried to take her away. Stay with me, because once you hear what happened next, you'll never look at an animal the same way again. It was a Thursday, late afternoon. The wind had turned sharp, carrying the kind of cold that makes your bones ache. I was balancing 2 grocery bags, trying not to slip on the half-frozen gravel of the parking lot behind Miller's Feed and Supply. That's when I saw her. At first, she looked like a pile of dirty blankets tossed in the back of a rusted-out pickup truck. But then she moved. Barely. A single paw twitched. Then a pair of golden brown eyes opened and met mine. There was no bark, no growl, just a stillness. A moment so quiet it felt like everything around me had paused. The wind, the distant hum of traffic, even the sound of my own breath. It wasn't fear in her eyes. It was recognition. Not the kind you'd expect from an abused animal hoping for food or shelter. This was different. She looked at me like she already knew me, like she'd been waiting. Her coat was matted with mud and dried blood. Patches of fur were missing. There was a faint scar tracing the length of her rib cage, and one of her ears had a faded tattoo. The number 0174. No name, no tags. Someone had tried to erase her identity. But whoever she was, whatever she was, I couldn't walk away. I don't remember dropping the groceries. I don't remember climbing into the truck bed. I only remember the feeling, like something ancient had just clicked into place inside my chest. She didn't resist. She didn't flinch when I touched her. She just leaned her head into my hand and sighed. That sound didn't come from a dog. It came from a soul. Later, I would wonder why no one else saw her that way. Why they said, "You're crazy," or "It's just a stray. Let animal control deal with it." But in that moment, I knew this wasn't coincidence. This was a reunion, one lifetime delayed, and it had just begun again. Sometimes, what you think is chance is really a contract your soul made long before you were born. She didn't eat for the first 2 days. Not a bite. Not even fresh chicken or warm broth tempted her. She lay on the corner blanket I set beside the fireplace, unmoving, barely blinking, her breaths shallow and slow. But her eyes never stopped watching me. It was as if she was studying, measuring, trying to remember something not quite within reach. And every time I passed by, I felt it again. That pull, not from pity, not from instinct. Something older, something deeper. I'd seen wounded dogs before. I'd volunteered at shelters, cleaned cages, fostered pups from puppy mills, but nothing prepared me for the feeling I got when I looked into her. It wasn't just trauma I saw. It was memory, a kind of grief that didn't belong to this life. Something stored not in the body, but in the soul. There were moments, brief flashes, when her ears would perk at certain sounds. The click of my boots, the jingle of metal, the radio static between channels. Her eyes would widen for a second, then fade again. She'd been trained, conditioned, maybe even broken. But by who? For what? The vet I brought in said she had all the signs of a combat animal. Military scars, precision responses to command phrases. But she wouldn't respond to English, not even stay or sit, not even home. It was in one of those quiet nights, sitting beside her in the flickering firelight, that I whispered a phrase I hadn't used in years, something I once heard my grandfather say in German when calming horses on his farm. And she looked up, eyes alert, head tilted. I said it again, this time slower, with breath. Ruhig, mein Herz, quiet, my heart. She stood, took 3 shaky steps, then collapsed into my lap, as if she had finally come home. That night I didn't sleep, because I realized something terrifying and beautiful. This wasn't just a dog with a wounded past. She was carrying the echoes of someone who had once known war, maybe not in this life, maybe not even as a dog, but someone who had once stood beside me. Sometimes pain leaves the body, but the soul remembers, and it waits for the one heart it trusts enough to begin healing. At first, I thought I was helping her, feeding her, bathing her, sitting beside her as she shook through nightmares I couldn't see but could feel every time her body tensed, legs kicking into the air, breath rasping like she was running from something invisible. I told myself I was the rescuer, that I had done a good thing, that I had saved her. But day by day, that story began to unravel. It wasn't in anything dramatic, not some lightning bolt epiphany or magical moment of transformation. It was in the little things, the way I started dreaming again for the first time in years, and not just any dreams. They were vivid, tactile, almost familiar. There was always a battle, a forest, a river of smoke, and someone standing beside me, always just out of frame, a figure whose presence calmed me, even in the middle of chaos, whose breath matched mine, step for step. Every time I woke up, sweating, gasping, I'd find her there, curled beside the bed, eyes already open, watching, not like a pet, like a guardian or a mirror. She started to anticipate me in ways that were almost unnatural. If I reached for my coat, she was already waiting by the door. If I got lost in thought, she'd nudge my leg, grounding me. And when I sat on the porch in silence, wondering what the hell was happening to my life, she'd sit beside me, not needing anything, not asking for affection, just being there. That's when it hit me. I wasn't saving her. She was keeping me together. It had been 2 years since my divorce, a year since my father passed, 6 months since I'd stopped writing something I once thought I'd do for the rest of my life. I had been drifting, untethered, until she arrived. The woman at the local co-op called it trauma bonding. She said, "Sometimes 2 broken things find comfort in each other. Doesn't mean it's good." But she was wrong. This wasn't damage connecting to damage. This was 2 souls recognizing each other in the ashes. One morning, I found myself staring at her as she slept, and I whispered, "Who are you, really?" Her ear twitched. She didn't open her eyes. But I swear somewhere deep inside me I felt an answer. Not in words, in weight, in stillness, in that sacred, impossible knowing that we'd done this before. Maybe not like this, not in this shape, not in this lifetime, but somewhere long ago. I had been lost, and she had found me. You don't always recognize the soul you're meant to walk with, because sometimes it walks on 4 legs, and it remembers you before you remember yourself. Strange things started happening, not loud, not obvious, just subtle distortions in the rhythm of everyday life, the kind that, if you're too busy, you dismiss as coincidence. But I wasn't busy, not anymore. And when you sit still long enough, you begin to notice the invisible. It started with sound. She would stiffen at certain frequencies on the radio, especially static. Once, when I passed through a dead zone on Highway 93, the speakers crackled, and she whined low in her throat, not from fear. It sounded like mourning, like recognition. Then came the dreams. They weren't mine, or rather, they didn't feel like mine. I'd wake up sweating, breath caught, heart pounding. But the images that lingered weren't of anything I'd lived. They were of deserts, burning sand, steel, boots, men screaming in a language I didn't understand, and always a shadow moving beside me. Not human, not beast, something between. When I told a friend, one of the few still around, he half joked, "Maybe she's an old soldier, reincarnated to haunt your dreams." He laughed. I didn't, because it didn't feel like haunting. It felt like remembering. She'd follow me from room to room like she was on patrol. Sometimes she'd stop and stare into empty corners for minutes, tail still, ears erect. And every now and then, usually around 3, Dosia Mayuath, she'd wake with a growl, pad slowly to the front door, and sit there, guarding. But there was never anyone outside. Not once. And yet, I started checking too. Because the way she moved, the way she stood there, it felt like someone was trying to come in. And then came the symbols. I was cleaning the basement when I found an old footlocker that had belonged to my grandfather. He served in the European theater during the war, never talked about it much. Inside were medals, photos, and one folded journal. At the back of the journal was a drawing, a wolf, standing in front of a man in uniform. Below it, scrawled in his careful hand, were the words, "She never left my side, not even after death." I froze, because the wolf in the sketch had a tear in her right ear. Same spot, same angle, same presence. I ran upstairs. She was sitting by the fireplace, head tilted, watching me. It was the first time I asked aloud, without fear of sounding insane. "Did you know him?" She didn't move, didn't bark, but I swear my chest burned, as if something ancient inside me had just stirred. Some souls don't return to haunt. They return to guard. And sometimes they come back wearing fur and silence because words are too small for what they remember. It didn't take long for the outside world to notice. A neighbor, new to the area, reported a large aggressive animal wandering off leash, though she'd never left my side. 2 days later, an animal control officer showed up at my door with a clipboard, a tranquilizer gun, and a tight smile. "She doesn't have papers," he said. "No proof of vaccination, no collar, no chip, no breed registry." To them, she was a legal non-entity, a risk, a number, a problem to be solved. I tried to explain how I found her, what she'd been through, who she might have once been. He nodded politely, but his eyes said it all. "You've lost your mind." They gave me 72 hours. Either provide documentation or surrender her to a holding facility. "Don't worry," he added. "We'll evaluate her temperament. Maybe a rescue group will step in." I didn't answer, because I already knew. They didn't see her. Not really. They saw muscle and scars. They saw what she looked like, not what she carried. They didn't hear her breath shift at certain songs, or feel the weight of her stare when I fell silent for too long. They didn't know she could calm my nightmares just by lying near me. They didn't know she'd started waking me up 5 minutes before every alarm, without fail. How do you explain to a system built on logic that this animal is a soul companion, that she remembers something the world has forgotten? That night, I sat by the fire with her head on my lap. She was calm, even as I trembled, even as I whispered, "They want to take you away." She opened her eyes, and I could swear she understood. Not with panic, not even fear, but with that same stillness she had the day I found her, as if to say, "They can take the body, but they can't take what we've already found." I spent the next morning calling every rescue, every vet, every local shelter, trying to find anyone who could help me buy time. No one could. Rules were rules. Without proof, she didn't exist in their database. And what doesn't exist doesn't matter. This is the part no one tells you. The system doesn't care about miracles. It doesn't care about connections that defy paperwork. It has no field for reincarnated companion or unfinished soul contract. To them, she was just a stray, and I was just a man too broken to know better. But some things are more real than paper. Some bonds were written before birth, in a language the system was never meant to understand. On the second night after the warning, I had the dream again. This time, it was clearer. I stood in a ruined village, mud brick homes crumbling under smoke and fire. There were gunshots in the distance, children crying, and me crouched behind a collapsed wall, bleeding from the shoulder. Beside me was a shadow, not human, not beast. She didn't bark. She didn't run. She pressed her body against mine, shielding me, as if trying to hold my spirit inside my chest. I reached out. My hand touched her fur, rough, warm, real. And then a word escaped my mouth. Not English. Something older, maybe German, maybe Slavic, but I felt it rather than understood it. And when I woke, she was there, sitting, still, watching me with those golden eyes that somehow looked older than time. I didn't question it anymore. The dreams weren't imagination. They were remembrance. I began to wonder, had she been a human before? A soldier, a healer, a part of me, or maybe we had lived together in a time where such questions didn't matter, where souls weren't split between species or names or roles, just connected. I started writing everything down. Every dream, every pattern, every phrase that came through my sleep. And when I searched them, these strange words and names, I found places I had never visited, but could describe in vivid detail. Mountain passes, old battlefields, abandoned monasteries in Eastern Europe, more than once. She responded to these names, not like a dog hearing a treat word, but like a soul perking up at the sound of home. I read about Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, and his readings on animal reincarnation. He believed some animals were more than instinct and training. They were fragments of soul's guides, watchers, or echoes of someone we once knew. The more I studied, the more I saw it in her, in the way she moved when I read aloud from his books, in the way she would circle twice, always counterclockwise, before laying down as if retracing an old ritual. Once, I placed an old military jacket near the fire, inherited from my grandfather's trunk. She walked over to it, sniffed, and laid down with her head on the sleeve, as if claiming it, or mourning it, or remembering it. I sat across from her and whispered, "Did we do this before?" She didn't answer, but I felt the reply, not in words, in the warmth of the fire, in the silence between our breaths, in the certainty that not all truths need to be proven to be real. Some memories don't belong to this lifetime, but they wait in fragments and dreams until the soul is quiet enough to hear them again. The morning of the deadline arrived with an overcast sky and the kind of silence that carries weight. I didn't sleep the night before. I sat on the floor beside her, hand resting on her ribcage, feeling each breath as if it were my own. Because in some strange way, I had two options. Let them take her file, the surrender paperwork, say goodbye, and trust a system that never saw her soul. Or fight back, break the rules, risk fines, charges, maybe worse. But what do you do when the law tells you to abandon something that saved your life? When the world demands you prove the unprovable love, memory, soul contracts. She didn't beg. She didn't hide. She stood by the door that morning with the quiet dignity of someone who had seen death before and wasn't afraid of it anymore. When the knock came, it was sharp and sterile. 2 officers, this time, clipboard, tranquilizer, restraint gear. "She's being transferred," one of them said, "to a secure facility pending evaluation." I stood between them and the doorway. My voice didn't shake. "She's not going anywhere." They exchanged glances, the kind professionals give when dealing with someone unstable. But I wasn't unstable. I was anchored for the first time in years. I told them everything, not the legal version, the truth. How she found me, how I began to dream again, how her presence woke something in me that no therapist, no medication, no amount of meditation could ever touch. I showed them the sketch from my grandfather's journal, the dreams, the German phrases she responded to. They didn't believe me, not really, but they didn't move forward either. One of them, older, softer, lowered his voice. "Sir, We don't have a protocol for any of that. If she has no papers, we can't let you keep her. Then I'll make my own papers, I said. It wasn't a threat. It was a vow. They gave me one more day, a technicality, a gesture, maybe out of sympathy, maybe because something in my words shook something in their own shadows. I don't know. But that night, I made a decision. If they came again, I would be gone. I had no destination, no plan, only her and the knowing that some bonds are more sacred than any law. There comes a point when you must choose to live within the lines drawn by men, or to follow the truth etched by the soul, even if it costs you everything. We didn't run. I thought we would. I imagined throwing bags in the back of my truck, disappearing into the mountains, living off-grid with her by my side. But that's not what happened. On the final morning, the sky turned soft, the kind of pale gray that feels like forgiveness. Snow had dusted the fields overnight, turning everything still. She woke before me, as usual, but this time, she didn't wait by the door. She stood at the edge of the porch, staring into the tree line, unmoving, alert, and I realized she wasn't afraid, not of being taken, not of the future. She had already made peace. It was me who hadn't. I stepped out beside her, my breath curling in the air. I placed my hand on her back. She leaned in, gently, then stepped forward off the porch, into the snow, toward the trees. She didn't run. She didn't look back. She walked, deliberate, free, and as I watched her disappear between the pines, something inside me broke, and then healed. I didn't call her name, because I understood. She had come to remind me of something, to mirror the part of me I had buried beneath grief and forgetting. And when her work was done, she left like all soul messengers do, not with fanfare, not with pain, but with grace. Weeks passed, then months. No sightings, no tracks, only dreams. Sometimes she's beside me in them, silent as always. Other times, I see flashes of her in the faces of wild creatures, foxes at dusk, the eyes of birds on fence posts, and I no longer ask if she was just a dog. I know now she was a soul, one I had known before, one I will meet again. And her leaving wasn't loss. It was a gift, because after she left, I started writing again, sleeping again, feeling again. She didn't need saving. She came to save me, and when I could finally stand on my own, she returned to where souls wait between lifetimes. Some companions don't stay forever, because their purpose is not to walk with you, but to awaken the part of you that forgot how to walk at all. And now, when people ask if I ever found her again, I say she was never lost, only waiting for the right moment to remind me who I am. If you've ever felt a connection so deep it made no sense, a glance from an animal that made your heart ache, a moment of silence that felt like a memory, you're not imagining things, you're remembering, because some souls don't wear the same faces each time. Sometimes they return with fur instead of skin, with silence instead of words, with presence, not explanation. And if you've ever lost one of them, you know that grief doesn't just come from losing a pet. It comes from parting with a part of yourself. But here's the truth. They don't really leave. They shift. They evolve. They return sometimes in dreams, sometimes through others, sometimes in the wind when you least expect it. So if this story found its way to you, maybe it's because someone you once knew is reaching through the veil, reminding you that your bond was real, that it still is, and maybe, just maybe, they're waiting for you to remember them, too. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share your own below. Have you ever felt a soul connection with an animal? Have you dreamed of one who left and woke up knowing they were still with you? Leave a comment. Let's honor them together. Subscribe to hear more soul stories like this of memory, loss, and the invisible ties that bind us across lifetimes. And if someone you love has walked away, know this: They may be gone in body, but the soul never forgets the path home.